Welcome back to the Business of Enterprise IT. This is Josh Davis. I'm Marketing Director at InfoSystems, and we're getting ready to record, let me see, we're on episode 7 of the Business of Enterprise IT. 2018 has been going well. We've recorded lots of good podcasts. Be sure to check out our other podcast series, Business and Technology in Tennessee, and also IT Coach for Small Business Leaders. Today is kind of an interesting setup. We're recording on the road in Maryville, Tennessee, and I'm here with a special guest. And Dan, I'll let you introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Josh. My name is Dan Magid. I'm the Vice President of Solution Sales at Rocket Software, and I basically run the parts of Rocket Software where we do modernization and IBM solutions.
Very nice. So just to provide some context here to our listeners, InfoSystems, APSU, and Rocket Software have partnered together to do a couple of customer-facing events. Last, was it Wednesday? Wednesday, Chattanooga. We did a baseball game with the Chattanooga Lookouts. Spent some time together, got to know the Rocket Software team. You and a couple of others came to town to spend the day with us. And then today, which is Monday, June 11th, we're in Maryville right now. Later on, we'll be out closer to the Sevierville, Tennessee area to watch the Tennessee Smokies. And honestly, I couldn't tell you who they're playing. My intention is just to see the Tennessee Smokies and spend time with you guys and some InfoSystems customers and some Rocket Software customers. So we look forward to a great baseball event tonight. But Daniel and I thought we would take the opportunity today to record some podcast content while he's in town from sunny California.
Right? Yep.
And so here we are. And I guess I'll provide some additional context. The events that we're doing are sort of focused events where we're going to be presenting information about modernization for IBM I, and I think you guys also focus on Unix systems.
That's correct. So we do modernization for IBM I, we do modernization for Unix and Linux systems, tandem systems, for a wide variety of systems that are out in the marketplace.
So when we talk modernization, let's just go ahead, and just so Daniel, you'll have some context into our podcast series, we typically are speaking to line of business leaders, non-IT line of business leaders, and also IT executives or even IT department professionals at some of the larger companies in the area and around the area, not just in the Tennessee area, but we service a lot of the surrounding areas in Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Western Carolinas. We've got a lot of customers spread out around our geography, but we try not to talk over the head of non-IT executives by getting too technical in our lingo. And I know I'm not necessarily an IT person, but just being in a marketing role for an IT organization, I tend to absorb all of the nerdy stuff the IT guys say.
Yes, we have a lot of jargon.
And I tend to repeat.
We have our own language.
Yep. So anyway, we try on this to keep things a little more related to business conversations, talk about the technology, but not in a way where we're going to, lose our core audience, which is the business decision makers, the business leaders. But we want to inform them because this is a story I'm sure you guys tell all the time to customers and prospects all over the country, is overcoming the objection that IBM I is a legacy system that's outdated, no longer relevant, that people need to move off it to other platforms. I personally hear that argument all the time. So when we're talking IBM modernization, IBM I modernization, how would you speak to that objection of, hey, this is a legacy platform, you need to look at something else to power your business?
So, great question, and in fact, you're You're right, modernization actually is a business conversation. It's a conversation about how do we ensure that our systems are staying up to date with the latest in technology, emerging opportunities, challenges that we face as the market moves forward. And modernization is an ongoing process. It doesn't ever stop. We will continue to modernize for the foreseeable future, and we've been modernizing since computers first came out.
Yeah.
So we'll keep doing that. The perception that you bring up about the IBMI, it's really a misperception. Mm-hmm. People think of the IBMI as a hardware box. They think it's a particular machine. The reality is that the IBMI is based on Power Systems hardware. It's exactly the same hardware, the same chips that you would use to run a Unix system mm-hmm. that you would acquire from IBM. So it's all the same stuff. The problem is that we've been building applications for the IBM environment, which is the operating environment that runs on top of that hardware, and we've been building those applications for the last 30 years. In fact, for the last almost 40 years, if you include the predecessor System 38. Mm-hmm. So we have a huge amount of legacy code. Now, one of the great things that IBM did for their customers is they told their customers, look, if you build applications for this system, we will ensure that they will continue to run as we build new operating environments, as we push this system forward. They'll keep running. Yeah. And customers have taken advantage of that.
Yeah.
So we now have applications running on the IBMI that were built when green screen was state-of-the-art 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So that was state-of-the-art technology. Customers have chosen to continue to run those applications because those applications are the core applications that run their business. Mm-hmm. And over the years, those applications have been tailored to finally match how those companies do business. So trying to replace them is a really, really difficult thing. But because IBM did this thing where they allowed people to continue to run that technology, we have people still running green screen applications. And so people who don't understand the box, don't understand the operating environment, look at it and they see a green screen and they say, oh, that's old.
Yeah.
What they don't recognize is you can run Node.js, you can run Angular, you can run Linux, you can run all the latest, neatest, coolest technology on an IBMI.
Yeah, and I guess the green screen, from what I've absorbed from the smart guys that surround me on a daily basis, is there are certain advantages to running green screen applications. One is it does not take a lot to paint the screen. If you don't have the graphical overlays that the modern systems, and so maybe some of the people stick with it just because of that. I don't know. But Rocket Software, you all work with your customers on creating the modern looking user interfaces for even those older applications. Can you sort of explain the new modern user interfaces and how you guys typically work with your customers?
Well, first, you bring up a really good point, which is when you are doing modernization, you want to think about what is the problem you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. I do get a lot of IBMI, old-time IBMI people who say, I work on the green screen because I'm constantly 40, 50, 60 keystrokes ahead of the screen. I know exactly what's coming up and I can just sit there and key away and the system will catch up with me. It's not something you can do in a graphical user interface. Yeah. Somebody who really knows the system can do that. And ironically, if you look at a modern Linux or Unix system, you often find the developers work from the command line. Mm-hmm. They like working on the green screen because it's very fast. Yeah. Now, that being said, it's really critically important for end users to be able to use modern graphical user interfaces because they're easier to learn, so you can get people up and running much faster. You can put a lot more information on the screen. So there's a lot of things you can do with a modern user interface that you can't do with the green screen. So you want to make sure you're looking at what is the problem we're trying to solve and for whom. Who is it we're trying to solve that problem for? And make sure that you focus your modernization efforts on solving those problems.
Yeah, and so you bring up the issue of solving problems. What are the typical issues you hear from customers that you're working with that your platform solves for them?
So, for example, in today's environment, organizations are increasingly interconnected. Mm-hmm. So computers are talking to computers rather than a user getting involved in the middle. And so we're having, if you look at a major supply chain for a manufacturing organization, oftentimes they are ordering things from their suppliers, and their suppliers are in turn ordering from their suppliers. automatically in order to support a just-in-time manufacturing environment where the systems are simply keeping track of what is it we have, what is it we need, when do we need to deliver, and they just start shipping out all these orders out to everybody up and down the supply chain and getting the transportation companies involved in. A lot of that is machine-to-machine communication without getting users involved. So one of the problems we need to solve is how do I integrate all those systems together? How do I create an environment where systems can talk to each other in an easy way and a non-fragile way? If I write custom user interfaces for everybody who talks to me, I then have to maintain all of those custom user interfaces, and those things can break. What I want to do is create a generic way of people to talk to me. So that's why people move to things like web services, where they create services that allow people to talk to their systems programmatically rather than having to have a user talk to the system.
How much of what you do out in the marketplace is driven by one of the points you brought up a moment ago, which was the command line interface is harder to learn and use from people who would also have a graphical user interface as an option? How much of that do you hear out in the marketplace of demand driven for a Rocket software, the user interface product, just from the point of, hey, we've got new IT people who are coming on board, or we've got other people in our organization that need to use this application, and green screen or command line is not an option for them?
Right. So that's actually a big driver of business for us. So we actually do a lot of work with companies that have service desks, where they, especially in organizations that maybe retail organizations where they have a seasonal spike in their business, and they find that they have to bring in hundreds, even thousands of people for that seasonal business and get them trained up. Trying to train them on a green screen application can take a very, very long time, especially since most of the young people they hire don't know anything about a green screen or unfamiliar with it. So they want to have a graphical user interface, first of all, that those people will be familiar with, but secondly, it has a lot of methods of prompting the user to help the user understand what it is they're supposed to do next.
Right.
And so the graphical user interface gives you a lot more power, so you can dramatically reduce the amount of time it takes people to get up to speed on your application.
Yeah, and I'm not really familiar with the curriculum that's being taught in universities and technical training schools these days, but I mean, what are the odds that they're still doing any type of that an IT graduate or an information systems graduate today has received any command line training at all?
So they will get command line training. So my son is a computer science major at the University in Ohio. And he has learned command line for Unix and Linux because Unix and Linux programmers work on command lines.
Yes.
They don't learn green screen application interfaces.
Right.
So you're just not going to find people who have ever sat down at a green screen and used a green screen interface to do data entry. They have no idea about that. It's completely unfamiliar.
Now, would the reason for that be that the software vendor that created that application, the training would have to go through them? These are more closed off environments rather than the Linux and Unix operating systems that are open source and accessible. Yeah, I mean, is that really the driver there of why people wouldn't be exposed to that?
That's part of it. It's also the perception that the green screen is the old way of doing things, and universities want to be on the leading edge teaching their students the latest, coolest, neatest stuff. But there's also been a fundamental shift in how people expect to interact with a computer. When I was first starting to learn how to work with computers, you would expect to take out the manual and read the manual. You would expect to go through a big training program to learn how to use the application.
Yeah.
Now people are used to using their smartphones, and they're used to being able to look at the screen and knowing what to do.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to ever have to pick up a manual. I want to look at the screen and be able to figure out, okay, I know what I need to do next.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the biggest training programs now is within the software itself. You're typically going to get in context tips on how to use the product. Here's what you do next. Maybe it's a step-by-step tutorial, or at the very worst, some type of video, a training video that you access online when you purchase software. But
Right, you're going to get inline tooltips.
Yeah.
You're going to get something that'll say, the next thing you might want to do is this, or are you trying to do this? Here's how to do it. So you'll see that within the application. And then you're right, then people will, if that doesn't work, they're going to go out, search on the web, see what they can find, and hopefully they'll find some YouTube tutorial where that'll step them through doing whatever it is that they need to do.
So beyond user interface, and I don't know how big of a percentage or chunk the user interface product, I'll just call it product for lack of a better term right now, but I don't know how big of a chunk that is of Rocket software overall. I know you all have a lot of different stuff that you do, including, from my understanding, you custom code software applications for some enterprise customers. So can you explain a little more what maybe the complete picture of Rocket software and other things that you're doing for modernization?
So Rocket Software builds enterprise infrastructure software for the largest enterprises in the world. I mean,
okay.
Basically, you go into any major enterprise anywhere, and they will be a Rocket customer. They're running Rocket software. So our software is there to help people take advantage of these huge investments they have in IT infrastructure. So whether it's managing the systems, whether it's modernizing the systems, whether it's managing the components of the applications that are running on those systems, Rocket has solutions in a whole variety of places. We have over 200 products in the Rocket product line.
Wow.
So in 15,000 customers. I mean, Rocket is a large, significant organization in that IT market space. I focus on the modernization piece, which is a very, very important strategic part of what Rocket is doing, because as I said earlier, everybody is modernizing and everybody will continue to modernize, because modernization is simply moving forward as the market moves forward. And part of what we help people do is we help them look at the modernization problems they're trying to solve and then bucket the things they need to do so that they can decide what is the best solution for each problem I'm trying to solve. Because in modernization, you're going to have a variety of challenges. And you want to make sure you're using the right tool for the problem you're trying to solve. So for example, as you brought up early on, an executive may have said to you, I don't ever want to see a green screen again. I want, everything should be a web user interface.
Yeah.
Well, my application, we have customers whose applications have 30, 40, 50,000 screens.
Yeah.
So the question is, do I really want to write an Angular user interface for 50,000 screens? Probably not. What I want to do is I'm going to look at my system and say, okay, what screens do people use a lot? And I'm going to invest in modernizing those. And then I'm going to look at the screens, the 90% of screens that are very seldom accessed, and use a transformation tool to simply transform a green screen to a web page so it's a web screen. It doesn't have a lot of power, may not be really pretty, but it gets me that web user interface.
Yeah.
So for the 90% of things that are not used a lot, I can use a transformation tool, get it done really, really quickly. I solve the problem getting on the web. And then for the rest of the stuff, I might create web services for my existing application and then write a native Node and Angular application that accesses those core application functions and gives me the really sort of powerful look and feel that I'm trying to get.
So when you're working with customers and you're building with some of the modern tools that you're talking about, Angular and Node, and is it typical that they have programming resources on staff that will collaborate with you? Do you guys typically do all of the work? How does that happen?
No, we typically enable their own staff. The idea is our tool should be easy enough to use that they can use the tools to create the interfaces they want rather than having to hire us as a services organization to do that.
Gotcha.
If they want services, we typically work with partners to provide the services. And so we will bring a partner, and that's a fairly common thing to happen, is we'll bring in a partner to do some of the work to augment the staff of the customer to get the work done.
Gotcha. And so I know you mentioned last week when we were talking about a lot of the Rocket software platform, some of the other more focused product lines in addition to the user interface product that are typical for IBMI customers or users. What are some of those additional sort of product platforms?
So we have our whole DevOps product platform. So DevOps is for managing application development. And one of the problems you create by modernizing is you create all these different kinds of artifacts you have to manage. So it used to be back in the day that you would have an RPG program, a CL program, and a database file, and that's basically all you had to deal with. Now we have those things, but we also have some Python programs, and we have some HTML, and we have a bunch of elements that we have to manage that go onto the website, and we've got Node, and we've got Angular, and we've got Ruby, and we've got mobile development that we're doing on our mobile devices, so we've got Xcode, stuff that we're doing, or C# development that we're doing. So we have lots and lots and lots of different kinds of development that we might be doing, and I've got to manage all of that.
Yeah.
And I've got to make sure it stays in sync. If I make changes to the core application, I need to make sure that the web user interface properly reflects that. If I've got Objective-C code running on my iPhone devices, I might need to make sure that they can access the new functions in a way that makes sense from a mobile device. So I have a much more difficult management problem. We have systems that allow you to manage all of those parts in sync, so you can make sure when you deploy a change that it's getting deployed out to all of the places it needs to go.
Gotcha. And so just kind of thinking about, from our perspective within InfoSystems and thinking through a lot of the customers that we work with, and we do a lot of hardware work. We're not a software application company. We do a lot of IT infrastructure. We work in data centers. We serve as kind of the direct channel partner to several vendors for our customers who are either purchasing hardware. And we may or may not be performing services around the hardware purchases. But the one thing we rarely really get into is managing and modifying applications. Now our sister company APSU does have, they're more of an ISV themselves. They've got a software product called Maximize that is really intended for the IBM space. It also works for several other platforms that run on IBM Power Systems, so AIX and Linux. But the Maximize tool is really a remote monitoring and management tool for IBM Power hardware and whatever operating system is running on it. So it would allow a team of people in our office, our network operations center, where we have people staffed around the clock to monitor and manage the systems for third-party customers wherever they reside. Or it could also be installed on-premise for customers who want to utilize it themselves to monitor and manage their own equipment without our help. But beyond the software piece within APSU, InfoSystems is not a software company. So when you talk about managing all of those different dev pieces, from my perspective, it sounds like an incredibly complex scenario. If you've got pieces of all of these different code tools and trying to keep it all in sync and running, and is that an issue where complexity is like a super difficult task to overcome for these companies that are in that situation? Do they need to scrap pieces of it and try and consolidate down to a more simplified ecosystem? Do your tools help them with that? How do you deal with the complexity that gets created there?
So a couple things. One is, first of all, our software is designed to simplify the complexity. The complexity is going to be there. It's sort of the nature of the beast.
Right.
If you're going to have stuff that runs on mobile devices and runs up on web servers and runs on IBM i core systems or Unix systems or Linux systems, you're going to have a complex environment. And in fact, you're probably going to have multiple development teams working on those things, multiple operations teams running the hardware. So it becomes a complex environment. Our objective is to simplify it. So in that complex environment where every time I move something into test or into production, I have to make sure that the Unix code goes to the Unix machines, the Linux code goes to the Linux machines, the web server code goes to the web server, the mobile code gets out to where it needs to go in order to get on the mobile devices. All that stuff has to happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
We set up an environment where the customer simply says, this project I'm working on is done. Go make sure it all gets to the right places.
Yeah.
And then we take care of that. So we simplify the complexity for the user.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. The other side, sort of talking about that whole hardware thing that you were talking about and managing the hardware environment, We also have our high availability and disaster recovery solutions. That software that is designed if you're working in a 24/7 environment, you need to make sure your systems are always up and running.
Yeah.
It's a system for replicating between systems, so you can make sure you have a system available, so if you lose your primary system, you can immediately fail over to the backup system and you don't lose any time. You just keep running.
Yeah, and I know our team at APSU is actively working with Rocket Software to have that offering available to their to APSU customers. And APSU does not really work. They're not a sales organization where they sell directly to end users. Companies like InfoSystems, who are regional IT providers, are typically an APSU channel partner. And I assume that would probably be similar with Rocket Software, where you would partner with an IT agency who does business with the IBMI or Unix or Linux customer, and they would provide your solutions to that end user and do the services around it and things like that.
Right, exactly. In fact, we have an active program to train up partners who want to do that.
Yeah.
Who have access to the customers, who are working with customers and want to be able to put our infrastructure in place. We train the partners to do that, and we work with partners.
Yeah, and I guess as a point of clarity for the people who are listening or watching the podcast is, the reason we're doing these baseball events together is because that relationship was beginning to be formed between the APSU team and the Rocket Software team to make that solution available to all of our customers.
Right.
In the process of that, we decided to do a couple of events where we could get to know each other better, invite some of our current customers to come in and learn more about Rocket Software and the things you guys are doing, find out from InfoSystems and APSU, how are we going to be delivering those solutions? So, I think this is an early stage relationship between our two companies, but a growing relationship, and honestly one where, if you look at the business that APSU is in, which is the cloud services, the HA and DR, the remote monitoring and management, all of those services for IBM Power users, no matter what operating system they're on. And APSU does have a segment of the business that handles x86 workloads as well, but I guess as a sidebar here, I tend to go off on a lot of tangents if you haven't noticed. But
well, there are so many tangents to go off too. I mean, there's so many things going on. Yeah.
That's one of the places where we look to simplify things for our customers. If they have multiple platforms that they're running, Intel-based systems, whether it's Windows or whatever it may be that's running on Intel x86 servers, IBM systems, whatever it may be that they're running on IBM Power, we can consolidate that and provide it to them as a service, or make it easier for them to manage on their own from a single pane through our remote management and monitoring software. That was a lot of stuff to throw out there.
No, but I mean that's right. I mean that just picks up on what I was talking about before about the complexity of the environment. Modernization is not just software. Modernization is also hardware. It means moving your systems forward. Taking them to the next stage of whatever they need to do, and you've got Windows things that are being modernized. You've got Unix, Linux things that are being modernized. IBMI things that are being modernized, and it's again not just the application software. It's also the hardware itself. I'm putting in new kinds of disk technology, new kinds of backup technology. As I move the technology forward, I'm moving things to the cloud, so I've got hybrid cloud environments that I need to manage.
Yeah.
So if you look at modernization from sort of the holistic view of all the things that are involved, it's everything involved in moving my systems forward, which includes hardware, software, data, all the things I might be doing.
Yeah, with our podcasts, I typically like to structure, if we're going to record a couple of episodes, I typically like to do it where the first episode we sort of introduce the high-level overview of a company and sort of the business they're in and things like that, and then a second episode would probably be breaking down some of the technology. I think in our case, we're probably going through it reverse and up and down in all these different ways, but I do want to record another episode where we talk more about who is the ideal customer for Rocket Software. And I know I can sort of answer that question from InfoSystems perspective, but just to get you thinking before we jump into a next episode, I've only got you for a limited amount of time today, so I'd like to extract as much knowledge as I can for our listeners while you're here. But I do want to get into sort of that more business discussion as far. So we would honestly to help people identify, like, is this really the right solution for me? Because let's be honest, businesses they're being flooded with messages from IT providers, technology providers from all types of different, services and solutions, and it's easy to lose focus on, what goes where, what's going to help, what should be a priority, what are my, core initiatives. And when you're talking modernization, let's be honest, digital transformation, modernization, these are terms that tons of technology companies are using to approach customers. So, in hopes of sort of differentiating what we're talking about with modernization, I really want to, in our next episode, get into more of that. Who is that ideal customer, and what is the driving force that's going to allow them to say, yeah, Rocket Software is something I need to look at a little bit deeper. But before we get into that discussion, now let's loop back around to the technology side of it. Is there anything else that, from the overview of Rocket Software that you would like to share about, the work you guys are doing right now, the specific products, roadmaps, development on those, new announcements, anything that you'd like to, share before we close this episode down?
Well, I think the core of what we do is to help our customers protect the investments they've made in the applications that they're running and the IT infrastructure that they have. So we typically sell to customers who have systems that have been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Not people who are brand new startups building new stuff from scratch. It's people who have these applications that have been around for a long time. They've got a huge investment in them. And now they want to be able to take advantage of all of this emerging technology that makes doing business so much better for them.
Yeah.
And our job is to make that easy.
Yeah.
Is to make it easy for them to do that and play with the latest technology and use the latest technology in a way that helps a business. And that's really, we're enablers of that.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect lead-in to a deeper discussion about that in the next episode. So.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope you'll tune in to the next episode as well, where we talk a little bit more about Rocket Software, the specific customers that they're working with, and why those customers ended up, identifying Rocket Software as an ideal partner for modernization. Once again, I'm Josh Davis. With me today was Daniel Magid. Did I say that correctly?
Daniel Magid.
Magid, okay. Yeah. I want to say Magid.
Right,
and do a soft G, but I butchered that, so I'm sorry. So Daniel Magid from Rocket Software, and we look forward to sharing some more with you in the next episode. Thank you.
Great, thanks Josh.